Telecom Advisory Committee, March 4th meeting. I guess the first thing on our agenda, we need to approve the meeting minutes from the last meeting.
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes of February 4th, 2019.
I'll second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay.
Do you think we should have an election of officer the first thing? Since the other guy quit, just to make this,
So
make this guy official.
here was my thought on that, is we're going to have 2 new members, which is going to mean that fully 1/3 of the committee. Yeah, just because maybe somebody from there is interested, or I don't know. It just seems like
Makes sense.
that's a full committee
If that's
decision.
what you want to do, it's fine.
That makes sense. So I am the acting chair for the time being.
That's fine.
Yeah. So no one from the public to speak, of course. Doesn't happen very often.
But that's what you gotta do,
Right.
see? And once you get into the routine of this, it may sound old, it may sound stupid or whatever, but that's the way you run a meeting.
Of course. All right, so on to 4. We had the presentation to City Council. Tom, you wanted to speak about that?
Yeah, I think it went really well.
Here comes Kevin.
Hey, Kevin.
Hey, Kevin.
We approved your minutes. Talking about the memo presentation, so actually, yeah, I thought it went really well. I thought that it was well received. Council was very interested, and actually, I can report, I did not expect to be able to say this, that the first vote for municipal light plant moved unanimously out of rules in one meeting.
Cool.
Outstanding.
So, we weren't even planning to discuss it that night because we had a busy agenda, and then we're there, and Dan Riss was like, "Do you want to take another 15 minutes and take a look at this one?" He's like, "I'm all for it. Anyone have a problem with it?" No? Cool. So we
Excellent.
have, that'll be on, I'll move that out of committee. Or, you know what? I need to figure out if I need to schedule a public hearing for that or not, for that first vote. Like, some city council votes require a public hearing, and generally the adoption of state statutes does, so I might need to schedule a public hearing for the next, but we're making great progress on that end. And
Wouldn't the presentation at the city council meeting be considered a public hearing?
no, for it to be, there's
You
a
have to
formal
identify
process
it
where you
as
have to
such.
advertise it in the newspaper, and you do all this stuff so
Okay.
that people can know to show up,
Okay.
and that, yeah, there's like a formal public hearing thing, and then everyone needs to be given a certain allotment of time to speak on it, so we need to schedule it in the right place.
Can I ask you a question? So we didn't present, or Greg didn't present the whole letter, he didn't sit there and read it into the record, but given that it was in their packet, in the counselor's packet, had there been any sidebar conversations between counselors or any points they needed clarification on that they didn't ask about at the meeting?
I think that the current understanding from the council, and I won't speak for everybody, but the general sense I get is that they get that, in theory, this is something that would be great.
Yeah,
They get that taking this first vote just sets us up.
yeah,
I think that they understand that if we pass a municipal light plant, that still doesn't obligate us to do anything. It just
Right.
gives us the legal authority to do something.
And it doesn't cost anything.
And it doesn't cost anything. And so I think from them, there's no real strong opposition to getting us into a situation where we have the legal authority to do this if we want to,
Right.
with the understanding that we might look at it and say that it's not going to work out. So
Yeah.
I mean, that's always a possibility.
well, given we were the front page news the next day in the Gazette.
Oh yeah.
Oh, yeah.
That was the top story.
Yeah.
And then,
Anybody see the
did you read
editorial?
the editorial? Yeah, the
Yeah.
editorial was great.
I didn't see the editorial.
Yeah, there was an
It was
editorial
getting
yesterday.
recorded, my number estimates.
Oh, that's
Yeah.
great. Who wrote it?
Huh?
The Gazette editorial
Well,
board.
yeah.
Really?
Oh, yeah, they
They
came
came
out
out in
heavily in
favor of
favor.
what we're doing in Northampton.
Outstanding.
No way. I didn't even catch that.
catch
Yeah,
it either.
That's great.
Yeah, the whole editor, the whole Gazette on that left side.
Editorials are, yeah, getting an editorial board
From the meeting,
endorsement
but
is
everybody
a
wants to
big
take a
deal.
look, yeah.
Outstanding.
Yeah, I won't read it now, but that is,
It's making our case for us.
yeah, that's perfect. I will, yeah, beautiful.
That's huge.
Yeah.
Just a quick question. Assuming we do get a municipal light board going,
Mhm.
would that organization, in addition to what we want to do with it, have any influence or jurisdiction or whatever of the new solar plant that's going in off Park Street? Would you get
Probably
involved in that?
not. I'm not saying no because I haven't researched it,
Okay,
but probably not because that would be privately
it's
owned.
totally private.
And
Okay.
it would be carried over the privately owned wires that Eversource has on the poles.
Right.
Oh,
We-
okay.
So-
And we have existing contracts with
Yeah.
utilities in place. so,
Right.
Yeah,
Okay.
I mean, that doesn't preclude us from somewhere down the road looking into
Yeah.
it.
Understood.
Right.
That's a major.
I just thought, the
Yeah,
coincidence of the two.
yeah.
Well, to your point though, I have heard people say in the past that it would be helpful if we had a government or a part of our municipality in which, you know, any investment that the municipality might make into solar or other renewable energies would kind of have its jurisdiction. And we don't really currently have that.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, I guess if we were to do something like that, we probably could build, like, we could just have some municipal solar. I mean, it would still presumably be carried across Eversource's wires, but like,
That's what we did on the landfill, but that's all leased, you know. We
Yeah.
got into a wreck, so the ownership thing is a lot more complicated.
right,
So
yeah, yeah.
I think this would actually, you know, be a good first step towards any of those things, so.
Yeah.
And hey,
A
if it,
small step.
right, if it frees us up to make solar stuff easier, that's a bonus, but
Well, from what I understand of that lease on the landfill solar is that we do have an option to buy after 10 years.
Really.
And we would have to have a municipal light plant if we were to go that route, but it is gonna be coming up in several years, and it might be something that the city would look at.
Mm-hmm.
It'd be very helpful to have this.
That's actually right around the corner,
Mhm.
that thing on the landfill, because I got on the planning board about 11 years ago, and that came up almost, I think it was the first year I got on, so that's gotta be coming up pretty quick.
right.
A few years, maybe.
That was
One
when
more
Mike was
point
still right
about
at
the
the end
meeting.
of Mike's life.
After the meeting, Greg and I were talking with the mayor, and she had recommended, and I'm blanking on the, I probably would have paid more attention if I had known Greg was gonna resign, but, I was, well, no, I just forget the exact language she was using, but she was saying we should put that letter in the record with another project that's going on, and I wanna say it was either the Union Street redevelopment or the Cottage Street, like, the business district stuff or something, just because then it could be, it would
That's in one,
make grant stuff look a little bit
that's in
better
one of
and
the
possibly.
email threads, cause I was just looking through them this
Okay.
morning, I think
So she
Greg
was-
and somebody
Yeah,
else.
so I have to talk with Greg to jog my memory about exactly which project she was
I
talking
don't
about.
think there's any reason we can't talk to him, you know. It's
No, we-
just
Oh, no,
that
no,
he
no,
has
yeah,
to be
no, it was just to
careful 'cause
remind
he's-
me of the exact project she was talking about, but the way she was saying it was, you could possibly get some money for further research or a
Right.
design
Yeah, I
grant or
think it's
something.
very smart.
If this thing were part of the record of another project, at least, you know, saying, hey, this is another dimension of
Right.
this redevelopment we wanna do, or.
Yeah.
And then that would also help us with, if they do move if we do move forward with, if the city council wants to move forward with it, doing a research phase and then also like a pilot project phase.
Exactly.
So, we could get more, or apply for more grants and have
That would
greater
get us in the
reach.
cycle, I think, is what
Yeah.
Greg was talking about,
So-
so, yeah, we would, you know, have a
Right.
leg up on that whole process.
So I need to, he and I have talked over email, but we need to have a phone conversation with him. I think he's just been super swamped with the new job, so we haven't done that yet.
I wonder if there's a way that the EDIC can help with this, like a letter of recommendation or somehow the Economic Development Industrial Commission, because I know that they, you know, or, because I serve on that committee and we talk a lot about the different zonings and the different redevelopment projects. So it might be possible to link it in through that way.
Do you think they'd wanna just get it on their agenda to just do a presentation about where we are and maybe they could hear it out and?
Yeah, it's on the agenda every month, I give them a little update of what we're doing.
Oh, okay, well then,
I'll mention that to
bring
them.
that letter and and this editorial and
Certainly, yes.
do
Maybe
something like
that
that.
article that was posted the day
Yeah.
after the meeting, because they did do a big.
Yeah, that was well done. I actually, in follow-up to that meeting, spoke a little bit with the mayor, and she proposed an idea that I hadn't thought of before. Or I guess maybe I proposed it, she liked it. But it was, I shouldn't put words in her mouth, but it was the possibility that when it comes to research for this, for cost estimates, it might behoove us to speak to the city, there's like the deputy treasurer, assistant treasurer, something like that, who knows everything about this stuff, but that the city might consider issuing an RFQ, so a request for quote. And what we could, I mean, because, Westfield has obviously said something, and then, I don't know if we ever explicitly discussed this, but HG&E sent me and Greg an email being like, hey, if you end up going on with this, we want to bid on it. And so I wonder if we put something out, if the city of Easthampton put something out saying, we are interested in adopting a municipal light plant and then building our own telecommunications system and fiber and everything. We're thinking of doing this in 2 or 3 years, and we're just interested in what existing MLPs or private sector vendors would charge to provide this kind of service. And we want a detailed cost breakdown of what you think it would cost to get it up and running. And maybe even be as a bonus, we'd like an estimate of what you think with the system that you set up, what would the maintenance cost be? Because some of them might say, oh, and then in addition to building it, we could share services
you
or
could get
something.
a separate bid on that. I did this
Well,
in
yeah, but there'd be
Westfield, doing construction work, they put out requests for proposals, and I bid on them occasionally, and I get them, so.
Right.
It's fairly standard for any services.
Yeah, so requests for proposals are something that I do at work constantly. But in my old job, when I was doing a lot with the federal government, they would
Right.
they would sometimes send out requests for quotes,
Right,
which is where they're not obligating them to doing anything.
right.
They're just saying look, if we wanted to do something like this, what would you charge us
Mhm.
to do it?
Right.
Because they're trying to work in their budget and they need a sense. It's just hypothetical. And of course, the downside of that is that it could be that over those 2 years they decide that the value of their services is quadrupled, or whatever. But I think if we're trying to get a sense of how we would even move forward on this, I think that's one way that we might be able to do
So would we
something.
do this right at the beginning before doing the poll survey and all of that, or are you saying it is somewhere in the middle of the process?
What would
Once we have more information.
I think the best way to do it would probably be if you could do a poll survey. I mean, I'm still convinced that it's sitting on some file in the
Right.
city engineer's computer
Mhm.
is a poll survey. Every time we put up a new poll, we
Right.
have to pass. The city council has to approve its existence.
Mhm.
I just believe that somewhere we have a sense of what is on all those polls. I don't know where.
DPW doesn't really keep really good digital records.
Well, they might be paper, but it has to be somewhere, right? This is something that public safety has to
Has
know.
anybody ever
Is there
approached Joe?
is there any possibility that information might be contained within the GIS maps in the assessor's office?
The assessor's office, I think I've seen their GIS maps, and they're all
Okay.
for real property. I mean, I
Right.
guess polls probably are, but I doubt that they're putting this one has a charter connection at 16 feet up, and then it has this Crown Castle connection at 18 feet up or whatever it is, which is really what we need. Is we need a sense of
Okay.
what. So you weren't here for part of this.
No,
So
no, no.
I'll basically what's happening is for us to say we become an MLP, the big cost is that to hang fiber we need a foot of clearance.
Yeah, I understand that, right.
And in any case where there isn't a foot of clearance, we need to pay each of these companies to send their line workers out, and their line workers need to move
Stuff
the thing
around.
a few
Okay.
inches down, and the other person needs to move things a few inches down. They each have their own employees, and you can't just pay one guy to do it all.
No, of course.
And if bringing those wires down brings them below a certain level that's not safe, then you need to buy an entirely new pole in order to elevate the wires. So this, they say, is the most expensive part of building an MLP. And, you know, the second most expensive being connecting all the homes. But this is the real big cost, is just the make-ready work to even have it ready to start connecting to homes. But
Also
if
the
that,
bulk of the time, too. Most
Yeah.
of the time is just waiting for them to come out. And
Sure,
on those days
sure.
where
And,
they can
and,
work.
yeah, and the home connection, we could recoup at least some of the money from, from charges for connection.
And
if we
want-
decided to
Westfield
go that
doesn't
way.
do that.
Yeah, they,
Westfield doesn't charge it.
No, I
think it's a
understand.
$1,200 cost, did they say?
It was about $1,000,
$1,000?
up to less than $1,000.
From the pole to
actually,
the home.
Right.
And they
I-
were eating that cost, counting on
Some
making
of
it back
were
over time.
Okay.
So they weren't, but that's a decision that would
Right.
need to be made
Sure,
later
sure.
on. They
Yeah.
just did that because it was.
And I didn't necessarily mean the
Oh,
whole
no,
charge,
yeah.
but, shared between the MLP and the
Right.
customer.
Yep.
so, I mean, I guess the point is, yeah, this is something that I do think we need to follow up on, and I think we need to figure out if there is somebody in the city who has those records already. Because otherwise we're gonna have to pay someone to do a pole survey.
Have you talked to Joe Cook?
I haven't yet, but I could shoot him an
I
email
mean, if
tonight.
anybody would know about that, it would be Joe.
Yeah.
So,
Well, I can shoot him an email.
Yeah, my comment earlier was he tends to keep everything right in here, so, it's not good for, information or finding things out on the web, but Joe knows pretty much everything in town, especially on things like this.
Right.
He would at least either know or be able to steer you towards someone who would. Because even Stan McCoy didn't seem that much of an idea on that, who works for Verizon,
Yeah.
it's kind of nebulous. Nobody really, and you can't go to Charter and ask them for obvious reasons.
Well, I mean, technically, I guess we could,
We could,
do
but,
a public records request or whatever, but yeah.
yeah.
It seems like there's probably an easier way to do
Yeah,
it.
I'm just
Well,
trying
we
to
can't
figure
go
out.
to Charter, but we could go to Eversource.
We could potentially go to any of
Right.
them. I mean, they're regulated utilities. I'm sure that there's some sort of public
Eversource
records.
would be worth talking to, definitely,
Mhm.
because they're pretty helpful, actually.
And they actually own the poles, so they might actually have, them and Verizon, they might actually have the best idea of what's going on as
Right.
the owners of the poles.
Right, so
Um,
that's probably a good place to start. I'd be more than willing to try and track that down and see if there's any useful information, probably start with other source.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea.
I also have a friend who works at ISO as an engineer.
Right,
Cool.
yeah, okay.
I have a question. Does the RFQ, if we wanted to pursue putting out an RFQ, does that go beyond our mandate, or we need to go back to the city council to request permission for that?
I think the only thing that we could do is to go to the mayor
Okay.
and ask the city. I don't think we have the ability to,
Okay, so it would
to
come out
issue
to-
those.
But once we set up an MLP, then the MLP.
Well, then the
could do it.
MLP might be able
Right.
to,
Right.
but at that point, I think we will probably be
The
a
MLP.
disbanded organization.
Yeah.
at that
Or
point.
The
we
MLP would have
become
its
the
own
MLP.
board, right? Yeah.
Yeah, but right, and that'll have its own
Right.
set of criteria, and
Yep.
some of them are elected, some of them are appointed. And it's weird. So there's all sorts of stuff there, but I love the idea, by the way, of an elected one, just because I don't like my internet. I'm gonna vote out the people who administer my internet. But anyway, we're straying.
Yes, we have strayed a bit.
quite a bit. Okay,
So any more comments on the memo presentation to city council? Nope. All right, let's move on to committee vacancies. I probably should have put that up earlier.
Um,
So, as everybody knows, we've had a few people leave. Of course, Greg, I think I'm terribly sad that he's gone. I'm sure I'm not the only one, but, also Rayma has, put in her official notice of resignation, as have Greg. So we have 2 vacancies. I don't know when that'll be posted.
They're posted.
They're posted, oh, okay, good. And if you guys know anybody who's interested, you know, certainly reach out to them. I know I've reached out to some people, encouraged them to apply.
Remember that guy,
Aaron.
remember that guy that was here on the first few meetings we had?
Aaron.
Aaron?
Yes, Aaron.
yeah, I spoke to him a little while back, when, after Bill had, resigned to focus on the council, and, I said, would you be interested? And he's like, yeah, probably,
Guy's tough to listen to.
the only thing is, he said he might be moving.
Oh.
And he said he might be moving to Northampton, and he wasn't sure what was going on there. So I said, all right, well, you should put in another application if you want, and, just reach out to the mayor and say that you're interested. And I don't think he ever did. I mean, I could reach out again.
I wouldn't force it.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know, he may, for all I know, he's already moved.
He commented on something on the Easthampton group page just the other day. So
Yeah.
I think it was with
Yeah,
the water tax or the, I'm not, yeah.
Water
So-
Let's- sorry, I don't, whatever it is, let's not,
so,
let's not get off track.
no comment.
But I think he's,
Yeah.
that's where I thought of him when I saw it.
Right, yeah. So, yeah, I know that, I know there's a few people that applied last time,
Mhm.
last time that I advertised it. And, so, yeah, I imagine it'll be whatever. I told, I asked Nicole if it would be okay for her to, make 2 emergency appointments between now and, I guess that'd be the 20th of the month, because that way we can at least get them into subcommittee, but since they'll be emergency appointments, they can be present for the April meeting. So we can have a full committee again, and we can discuss things. I mean, we can still discuss things, but we'll be back in full strength.
Quorum now, so.
Yeah, here's a question I have for you guys while we're on that. Like, do you feel that there's any areas where we are like really lacking in competencies? Because I could put out something, you know, being like, hey, I really think we could use people who have knowledge of.
I mean, Greg was our IT specialist, you know.
Yeah.
He was our,
Would be nice, but,
yeah, I mean, most of us can muddle through and
Yeah.
learn on the fly, but he was definitely,
Yeah, if there was someone who had that background, that would be great. Or if people who had background in like actual engineering would also.
right, or yeah, there's Stan McCoy who's got,
Yeah.
you know, he's got all the
Right.
telecom.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah, where's this
He's
guy
a
here?
deep-
Any idea?
And you have a background in.
I do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
and I have a background in it,
Yeah.
it's just 2 centuries ago.
Right.
Okay, you could be our modem person.
Apple talk.
But okay, well, I'm going to use my city council platform to sort of boost visibility again, and then I guess we'll just I'll stay in contact with the mayor about making some emergency appointments before our next meeting so that we can have a full body.
I know this isn't on the agenda, but just on the survey, I didn't get any other edits, so considering the residential one finalized, but I'm still waiting to speak with Mo, because she's been out of town. I think she just got back in today.
Okay.
So hopefully this week I'll be able to sit down with her
And then we just.
get out I'll do, as soon as I get the business portion started, I will send it out to you. I won't wait till the next meeting.
Right.
In the
Are
interest
we
of
gonna
time.
let the mayor or use these, what is it, the city survey monkey thing? Are we gonna
They
set
don't
up a
have
webpage?
one, so,
Right.
yeah, I think we need to talk about that probably.
I can probably do one.
What's the cost of setting one up?
What, a
Well, we
webpage?
can-
It's really just hosting it. I mean, putting the webpage together is nothing, and there's plenty of survey tools and databases to track them that are free.
I have web space, I mean, we just need a domain, I think, it really.
If you've got a
costs
place
this-
where we can drop, cause it's
Yeah.
gonna be a simple page, it wouldn't be any
I think we'd
complicated.
wanna look at a domain, just to have a domain.
If we
Right.
finalize the
Uh,
residential one, then what I can do
yeah.
is start knocking it around. I've got
Yeah.
a couple of busy weeks, but on the weekends, it wouldn't
Yeah,
take long.
yeah, we
I've
could
done
do
this
that.
in the past.
I was
So-
saying, at the last meeting, I think Paul and I were talking about it, and I was saying, we'd probably need some kind of landing page,
Right.
just to sort of point people to, and then direct them to the survey, and maybe have a small form for
Let's-
signing up if you're interested, but yeah, it
Let's
needs
put
to
this on the
be.
agenda for the next
Yeah.
meeting, and we can hopefully get both surveys, and we can talk about, doing that. I
Yeah.
think that is something that we should really look at, but we also, I think we
I'll
have to have
submit
it on
that
the
to
agenda.
you to put on the agenda.
Awesome. Awesome. All right, so we had been talking about also last meeting, proposed or possible visits to Holyoke G&E and GSET. I know, Kevin, you had possibly reached out to them. Did you
I
hear?
haven't reached out yet
No.
because of Greg and everything
Yeah.
else that we've been hold up. But I can do that this week if you want.
Just don't get absorbed.
Just-
I'm not looking for.
Do you know, what position did he take there? Do you know?
It's an IT position, I
Okay.
think, but I don't exactly know.
Okay.
I saw him yesterday, I should have asked.
Looks like he's in his office.
Hmm?
Or his post on Facebook. I didn't know if it was more of like a
Well, he
strategic.
gave the names of the contacts, so I can reach out to both of them tomorrow. So,
Okay.
right.
Now, is Holyoke at all involved with the server farm that's in Holyoke?
No,
That's
that's a
Harvard.
state.
That's a state thing?
Yeah,
Oh,
state
Harvard.
thing.
It's-
with
it's
the,
a-
colleges, but.
Yeah, it's a combination between a bunch, like UMass, and then Harvard and MIT, and then
Is
a
it-
couple big employers are in there
Okay.
too. It's like a cooperative. It's pretty cool. I don't know if you've ever been inside. It's quite a cool space.
Is it like just longer version of what Westfield was doing?
No,
So
it's
rows and rows and rows of
right.
servers.
I think so. Upstairs, I think it's like that, and then the downstairs they actually set up like it's sort of like a public service. They set up like a meeting room.
Oh,
Like
the-
there's supercomputers there too, I believe.
Yeah, yeah.
For problem solving and stuff like that, it's not just servers.
Yeah, and they're and right. So it's a pretty cool situation actually.
I mean, it also becomes the largest network hub in the area in terms of, communications throughout the state.
That's true.
I'm not sure how accessible all that is, though, I think it
Yeah.
might be semi-private network.
Anyways, it'd be very cool to go see what Holyoke's got going on. I know that they service only the businesses in their own community, but they are looking at moving forward on building out the fiber optic system for South Hadley.
Yes.
And of course, they have expressed an interest here as well.
Well, it'd be a good time, we went through this the last time, to reach out to them.
I think ideally, if it's possible to do it on a Saturday, that's for most people work, but if not, then we could find a weekday.
Yeah, I mean, mornings, afternoons, during the week, because weekends are gonna be tough. Any preferences? I know you work during the day, so.
I mean, yeah, I work for the government, so I can get time off pretty easily.
Afternoon would be best for
Yeah, I
me
think
personally.
we'll try to set it up in the
Yeah.
afternoon,
Yeah.
and I'll ask them about Saturday first, so, and then I'll send them an email to the group.
has Westfield been in touch at all, or has anybody been in touch
Not
with
since
them?
I talked to Rich, a while back, so.
Anybody else have comments on agenda item 6?
No.
So then, for number 7, Easthampton Media, Stan had mentioned, or he sent out that email, right when we were going to the city council, talking about the impact that this project may have on Easthampton Media, so I wanted to put it on the agenda.
Okay.
I don't know if you wanted to make any comment about it?
I mean, I'm happy to answer any questions. I mean, you know, the concern that we have is our total income is based on the fees that Charter pays to the city, which is based on subscribership. So any impact that this has on cord cutting is gonna impact our income.
Do you get paid, or do you get money based only on cable subscribers?
Only
or-
cable,
Okay.
only cable.
So if I have only internet through them, you don't see
As long
any
as you
money?
keep it,
Or
oh,
cable.
you mean, yeah, right,
If I
right.
just had charter internet,
Right, it's.
you don't, none
no,
of, that
no.
you don't get any?
No.
Huh, interesting.
Yeah.
Okay.
So cord cutting obviously has been happening.
Oh, of course, of
Um,
course.
I'm guessing you guys have seen that in
Oh,
your
yeah,
budget.
sure, sure.
And has there,
I think I submitted a spreadsheet here,
You do.
showing the progression of cord cutting in Southampton and Easthampton, you know, over the years. And it definitely has been going down in both communities, you know, the subscribership. But, I mean, right now, once somebody goes to Charter for internet, then they're probably gonna also do cable. If they have, and because, I mean, you know, the Charter internet until very recently wasn't adequate in terms of speed and capacity to do everything, you know, without paying for it, like like you will be able to do with the capacity that we're talking about, you know, where you do all of your television through streaming services and you do your phone through a VoIP system, all on our network. And you only need a single connection into the house to do all of that. So, you know, I mean, you know, once people see that, you know, if I sign up with this group for the fiber internet, I have enough capacity coming into my house to do everything.
right. I mean, it may be possible that consumers would continue to have Charter television service and pair it with a municipal internet service because they want the advantages, but they also enjoy their cable television. I don't know.
Well, I mean, that's gonna also be difficult to manage because you get a lower rate on everything if you bundle all the services.
It's also worth noting, like, I mean, not all of you were, were here for that last meeting, or for when we went to Westfield, we went to Westfield, Genie, but when you go in, the first thing you see is their whole pitch on how you can cut the cable.
Yeah.
Right. They've got,
Sure.
here's this antenna that you could use instead, and
Yeah.
here's like how, what do they call it? A Roku,
Right.
Fire Stick, and all these things. And they're showing, like, through Roku, they're actually streaming, like, the local news. Like, live.
Everything, yes.
And they sell them at cost.
And they're selling them, right, they're buying them in bulk and
With
selling
free
them at cost.
education and free support.
Right. So, and they're doing that because there are people that are like, oh, well, I'm not happy with my internet and Comcast for them, but I would like to see, I would like this faster internet in their setting. But they don't want to cut their TV. They want to be able to watch sports and stuff like that. And so they're going to them and saying, actually, you can really do that pretty easily. If Easthampton were to adopt a similar model, if we're being honest about it, that would be the smart thing to do. Like, the smart thing for the MLP to, like, the responsible thing for them to do would be to go and help people cut the cable.
Right.
And if they did the responsible thing, it would lead to a decline in revenue to our community media.
And it's also, it's a double whammy, because there's also proposals that are being put forth by the FCC in terms of the reimbursement charges from the cable company to the city that come to us eventually as support, where they're trying to give the cable companies permission to take in-kind services that they provide to the city and deduct those from the percentage of subscriber money that they give to the city. So that, we're already looking at a potential cut from that in terms of income, and then this would be on top of that.
So have you been to deal with this loss of revenue through
Right.
loss of subscribers? Has the cable company been increasing their per subscriber, what they
What they pay
Give?
to us?
Yes,
No,
what
no,
they pay to you?
that's set with the
Uh-huh.
contract.
Okay.
And
So
that's a
does that-
10-year contract between.
Does that raise over time for the
No,
public, or
that,
just inflation?
with the
Yeah.
FCC, they're gonna try and make that go down
Right.
with this last
So
thing.
you just seeing
Yeah,
a
yeah,
decreasing budget
yeah,
every year?
and, you know, I mean, I haven't been in town for that long or on the board at Easthampton Media, but, there has been no change in the percentage income that is coming from Charter to us,
It's just
either
in
through
real
East.
money, it's just less.
Well, I mean, it's as people drop their subscriptions, it goes down.
Right.
But the percentage that Charter pays to the city hasn't changed.
Right.
You know, percentage per subscriber.
Right,
It's
right,
just
but
not
it
cool.
will, yeah, it's just.
Right.
So, a couple
So,
thoughts. I think that it's a curious thing for us to talk about because it is a private, it's a non-profit, and I don't know that we could commit to saying that we could give a portion or we're way too early.
no, I know we can't commit to anything. I simply wanted it to be on everyone's, you know, front burner kind of thing as we move forward.
Right.
Right.
I hear that. Has Easthampton Media explored any other ways to draw revenue?
Not specifically. I mean, I came up with an idea where, one of the major services that we offer is for the community to be able to watch city council and the mayor's things and, you know, other you know, governmental videos. And right now, we're offering them, people can watch them on the cable channel, 193. They can come to our website and watch them there, or we now have a YouTube site and they can stream them. So what I was thinking is that if this all happens, we could potentially put that YouTube site behind the paywall. So, I mean, we would no longer, we would no longer necessarily be broadcasting on the Charter channels, but what we could do is we could set it up is that if somebody has a Charter subscription, and that's generating income for us, then we could give them free access to the paywall. If they don't have a Charter subscription and they've cut all the cable except our fiber, then we could charge them if they want to watch those. And, you know, we could probably make up some portion of the income. It wouldn't be cheap to set that up, but it's a potential partial solution.
Yeah. I did. Go ahead.
Yeah, I'm sorry, can I, with the YouTube, I know you probably don't get the kind of clicks that would ever really generate any real money that would affect your
Well,
budget, but are you getting any revenue based on just having the YouTube?
No.
How much money you guys get off of each subscription? Any idea?
5% annually, approximately.
So if it costs $5,000 a year for my internet. You see 5% of that per.
No,
or
just
no,
for
not
cable.
internet. I'm sorry, cable.
No,
If it
cable,
costs
right.
$70 a month for cable.
I mean, you know, it may,
or
it may be
$100,
off the bundle,
yeah.
but I'm not positive.
I'm just curious, I mean, I can care less, I'm just wondering.
I mean, you know, our income is, you know, in, you know, the two plus $100,000 a year.
So I
And
know-
some of the money is also kept by the city from the money that Charter pays.
Oh.
And, you know, they give us a certain percentage and they keep a certain percentage. And part of the percentage that they keep goes toward renewing equipment in rooms like this and in the conference room upstairs and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And supporting all of that and paying, you know, our staff who come to do the city council meetings and the other events
Which is
and
a
so forth.
substantial amount of labor.
Oh, yeah.
I
Oh,
mean,
yeah.
I end up making a lot of calls for,
Yep.
hey, can I get someone to record this?
I did notice that there was an arrangement with Southampton where they pay $30,000 a year.
Well, it's not an arrangement with Southampton, we're their peg station as well as Easthampton's peg station. So they get the same kind of payment from Charter, and they give it to us, and we send people down to Southampton, you know, every week or so to do their town board meetings and their, you know, all of that stuff, just like we do here. They have one channel because it's a smaller community, we have 3 channels here.
You know, regardless of whether we get this initiative off the ground or not, you guys are gonna have to deal with the attrition you're dealing with.
Absolutely.
Because, you know, the broadband thing is coming. Speaking to that, wasn't Stan saying that whatever happened on that letter to Joe about Charter was gonna come in with better service? Because if they're gonna do that, that negates your argument that, you know, that they're not up to speed. That will make it. You know.
Yeah, if they end up actually I mean, I
Right.
haven't gotten that email.
Yeah.
I don't know if it only came up
Yeah.
to certain
Well,
people.
Or
It-
that,
it's
you
not
get like a
really-
FedEx
yeah.
package.
Yeah.
I'd like to see some more on that, but again,
Yeah.
until we see something concrete, we don't know that.
And it's not
Bottom
just,
line,
it's
yeah.
not just the speed, people are
Right.
constantly complaining
Yeah.
about, you know, the signal quality and the dropping and the.
Yeah, I think the point I was trying to make is I think this is happening. I think that should probably be addressed is when we're actually in the budgeting process of this thing.
Yeah.
And I don't think anybody on this committee has a problem with maybe we just pony up a certain amount of money every year to help Easthampton Media stay above.
Right. I mean, it's really, well, it's really impossible to like overstate how important those
No, I think we
public
have to
access
think towards the
services are.
future. Yeah.
So as we go forward, I have really no issue with looking into what, you know, what it would, what our, well, I guess the first thing we have to figure out, and maybe when we're handing out homework assignments, this would be a good one for you to figure out, is what legal authority an MLP would have to make some sort of agreement to transfer funds like that.
Well,
Um,
I would imagine that basically, in the same way that there is a contract between the city and Charter,
Mm-hmm.
which stipulates how much money Charter has to pay to the city, there could be a contract with the MLP.
I think in broad terms,
In the
you're
same-
probably right, but what I'm
We
saying
have to
is that
figure out
every
the
time that you do
details.
anything in
Devil's in the
Massachusetts,
details.
you have to actually look at it, and there's some weird reason why you can't do it this way, you have to do it a
And
different
there's-
way.
Yeah, it would only take one subscriber to bring a lawsuit and say, how come you can't take my money and just give it to somebody? You have to look at the.
Right, I don't know if an
Yes.
MLP has certain regulations about what they're restricted to do with their revenue, so there's questions like that. Before, and if we're gonna continue this conversation, I mean, I don't think that it's necessarily our job to, you know, sit around trying to understand
Agreed.
the depths of the revenue model that Easthampton Media is currently using or could potentially adopt. But I do think that since it's something that I think that there are, I mean, and people can disagree with me on this if you want, but like I think they're a valuable enough community partner that it's worth at least looking into what we could theoretically do if we wanted to, if we did this. That being said, there's a ton of stuff to do in the meantime,
Yep.
so
Yeah.
let's make that somebody's homework assignment and
I think you could say that, like, basing the only on cable subscriptions is a model that's, they're using that model as a way to plan your obsolescence. It's the way to phase out having to give you that money, and I think given the state of the FCC, you can only assume that they're gonna always, right now, err on the side of the corporation rather than the public
Mhm.
interest.
Sure.
And so, yeah, I'm sure you're planning on like a more hostile environment
Yeah.
with them.
And this is, I mean, there are, you know, both statewide and national organizations for what are called PEG channels. And they're fighting, you know, in Washington with the FCC about this, and they're filing, you know, grievances against it and so forth. And, you know, we'll see what happens, but,
So new models bound to start
Sure.
arising.
So to Tom's point about the legal aspect and how Massachusetts has some funky rules, it kind of reminds me of a debate that went on in this town a few years ago about whether or not we could fund the Easthampton Community Center and meals for students who come from low income or who got food at schools, you know, over the course of the summer, and whether or not it was legal for the municipality to give money to a nonprofit. And the administration at the time determined that it was not,
but they're doing it with
but it was
us.
questionable. Well, charter is.
No, the city is.
So
Charter
the
is saying the
city-
city.
Right, well, so the thing was that they decided that purpose wasn't serving like a community.
Is only serving a small part of the
Only,
community.
yeah.
Okay.
So I would think that these, obviously the service that Easthampton Media provides is something that applies to anybody living here, and it is a community service. I would wonder though if the funding for that might be something that would come out of our general fund, or whether it would come out of the subscribers, what's the best way or the most legal way.
yeah.
And if we could come to an arrangement where we take some of the fluctuation out of the funding,
Mhm.
it might be better for everyone involved.
Yeah, no, that might be a solution. Sure.
Just throwing it out.
Sure.
Yeah. That being said, there's exactly one person who says where the general fund revenue goes.
Of course.
So there is like, I mean, yeah, I just don't know, like, you know, we have like there's currently an arrangement where charter pays a certain amount. Is that is a similar thing? I mean, I just don't know. There's a lot of stuff there. I think, like, my gut says there's probably a way to do it. My gut says that if we have an arrangement that allows the city to pay Easthampton Media to provide these services out of this charter revenue, then provided that an MLP would be within their rights to assess a fee or to pay a share of their revenue to the city for that purpose, because that is one thing they were saying in Westfield, is that if you want to be like great, like really good MLPs, don't give up their revenue. They don't, because you can just have that go into the general fund and then they use that for this thing and that thing.
And
But
they won't
then
use it for maintenance.
yeah, and then they're not using it for maintenance.
Mhm.
So if you wanted to do it, then like that's the thing. You'd have to have some agreement where you're like,
That's what I'm thinking.
you get this, and that's what you get. Like, you know, because it is possible that, you know, this could be something that generates a lot of revenue. And it's, you know, that will become suddenly a conversation.
Mhm.
So
That would, yeah, in the same way that everybody was earmarking the cannabis money
Right.
before we had a
Yeah.
dime of it.
Yeah.
Like everybody
Yeah,
was
they're all
like,
backtracked.
tax-free future for
yeah,
everyone.
right.
Yeah, that's a
So
big-
that'll be a sub. If we do this, like this will be, I'm sure, a subject of lively public debate.
Mhm.
But I do think that on the flip side of that, I do think that when our elected officials are making these important decisions, you know, one thing that they should know in their pros and cons is what sorts of things might be done with a certain share of this revenue, right? Because, you know, could we Could we, first of all, could we fund our very valuable public service, like, public, TV through it? Could we provide a fund to provide access to certain low-income households? Like, these are questions, could we provide downtown public Wi-Fi? Like, there's things where you could potentially get some spin-off things if you're making a good deal of money, and if this is something that like Westfield, Westfield's talking about paying down their bond early, which, is an enviable place to be as a municipality. So if that is something, if Easthampton Internet ended up like in a similar place, these are questions that policymakers, city councilors, the mayor, might be really interested in knowing when we present our report. So,
Now, the MLP though is a department of the city.
yes.
So any income that comes in through the MLP for internet sales, the city decides how it's spent to some extent.
The mayor would, yeah, I think the mayor,
I think Westfield's keeping it
There-
pretty
I-
separate.
So there is a way.
they're
to
keeping
keep-
them separate, but I think that was a conscious decision that you would then need to make sure that you held
There are
city
two.
officials to.
There are two ways to organize the department, specifically in the receipt of funds. You can, when you create the department and you create the mechanism to collect funding, have a system where the department has its own account where all the deposits go into, and the department itself can, with approval from the city council and the mayor, in in their yearly budget, they can say, we expect to receive this much money based on our history, and we're going to spend this money where we see the need in maintenance and this and that, and whatever's left over at the end of the year goes into the general fund. So it doesn't go there to begin with. They can't just take it and say, well, we want to put it
Well,
here.
Minor correction, it goes to free cash.
Free cash, sure, of course. So
Yeah, the thing is, you would almost need to operate this like a for-profit business in the sense of you're gonna have to maintain the infrastructure, maintain operations. You're gonna have to be
Mhm.
thinking about if you were to contract services out, what the fluctuation in that cost might be. I mean, it
Right.
would just be so precarious to be drawing on that money for the city to be drawing on it rather than just leaving it
Right,
as
and I-
self-sustaining.
That's actually a super interesting point that we haven't really looked into the financing mechanisms of these things. It'd be interesting to look at some of the existing, like fiber networks, although they're all sort of rolled into larger MLPs. But, well, that's not true. Greenfields isn't.
it's true.
And all the hill towns aren't like, but those are sort of different. Sometimes I think we should really confine our study to cities, because it's just a totally different dynamic. I mean, like, like some of those towns have 1,500 or less people.
And the funding's different because
Yeah.
they get the grant money to
Okay.
build
Yeah,
it. And
right.
Big federal
it's-
check helps.
But I wonder how Greenfield manages their
Well,
fiber.
again, we're doing a site visit.
Right.
We'll be going, and so that's definitely a question to be asked.
How big is
Same with
Plainfield?
Plainfield has like 300 people.
300 people. I have a friend who knows I believe it's a woman who's running, the director of their initiative, who wanted to introduce me, but I mean, 300 is.
I don't know if it's actually 300,
But
it's like,
it's a small community.
yeah.
Yeah.
I'm from Williamsburg, and Plainfield's like, where the hell is that?
Williamsburg is the big city.
Yeah, it is. Right, we have a bank, so, yeah.
Have they got electricity there? I mean, they're gonna need it.
True story. I had a friend in
Everybody gets to turn on the
Plainfield
bicycle
who had like
instead
a
of
cabin
generating.
with no electricity, or no, it had electricity, it had no plumbing. There was an outhouse.
Outhouse.
Like,
No.
it worked. Anyway,
You don't do a lot of camping.
yeah.
Cabin in the woods comes with that.
And there are a number of municipalities around the state where the equivalent to Easthampton Media is a city department. It's a municipal department, and it's not a private 501c3, C3, whatever.
Yeah. I mean, that's an interesting thought as well. I mean, the city does have certainly an interest in making sure that all members of our community can view our meetings, and whether or not we are able to get even this off the ground. I mean, if we couldn't, and let's say Easthampton Media were to struggle or continue to see downturn or to dissolve, the city would have to find a way to get that done.
I would hope so, yeah.
It's just is what it is.
I don't, I agree with that.
I just don't think you would want, and I don't know how Westfield sets it up, Westfield Gas and Electric, and how they firewall between that and the internet, but you wouldn't want, if you set it up as a department, them to be subject to the vicissitudes of public funding and budgeting and then having to lay off people. I mean, any kind of
Right.
layoffs that might hit other departments, if that hit that department and that department had support staff and things like that, you could just, shoot yourself in the foot by
Yeah.
just totally having a
Yeah.
substandard service.
I have to imagine that in those sorts of communities, they're going into some sort of enterprise fund or something like that, where like there's some sort of general rules about how you can touch that money. And I have to also imagine that
Or would you keep
the
in reserve?
expansive Massachusetts general law governing MLPs has something to say about all of this.
Mhm.
But like the rest of the Massachusetts general law, that's horribly written. So
Are there any lawyers that specialize in or have a
I doubt
subspecialty
we-
in MLP?
I doubt we'd need
law or
that.
regulation?
I have to imagine this is something that would be pretty easy to just figure out. Like, hey, Greg, how does GSET do
Right.
like?
Yeah,
They're,
Greg reached out to that author, who had some
Susan
local
Crawford.
Yeah,
connections.
Susan
Yes.
Rose.
Yeah.
Yeah, I read her book. It's a good book. You guys should read it.
Yeah,
What's
but
the
she
name of the
wasn't
book again?
interested in talking to us
Fiber.
because, what's the point for her?
What's the name of the book again?
It's called Fiber something something. Susan Crawford is the author.
Susan Crawford.
Fiber's like the coming tech revolution and why America might miss it or something like that.
So it seems to me, though, as far as Easthampton Media goes, if we were able to do this fiber project, it seems like that could help Easthampton Media.
Yes.
I'm worried that people will think that it will hurt Easthampton Media, and certainly if we just like stole all these subscribers from Charter, it could. But I also wonder if the existence of Easthampton Media, I mean, were it to be solely dependent on Charter, it doesn't seem to have.
No, I mean, there's
legs.
nothing definite there either. No,
So
absolutely.
this could be a really good thing for
Yes,
Easthampton Media.
absolutely.
Yeah.
I don't think most people understand the funding mechanism.
No.
I mean, I would say like 90% of the general public probably
I certainly
doesn't know
don't
why, how. The
Right,
group
they
is
don't
funded
watch
and
it,
how-
but
what
then
they
you'll
count on.
have spikes like during the last mayoral election where there was a lot of people watching this mayoral
yeah.
Yeah.
campaign.
I mean,
So
yeah.
it's a service you gotta have.
And as a city initiative, which this would
Right.
be, Easthampton Media would be a partner with you in publicizing and, getting information out.
Right. Yeah, and I think there's also a political consideration here. And whenever I say that, I feel kind of jaded, but there's also a political consideration here, which is, I mean, we're a study committee, but if this was something that the city wanted to adopt and they actually wanted to advocate for it, I would hate to see them hamstrung because people said, well, I'm not in support of doing this because it's going to hurt Easthampton Media.
Exactly.
Right.
So I do think that it's worth our time to do some research into what an MLP, if formed, could do with its revenues. So somebody who is not me is going to have to look into that.
I volunteered for a couple of.
Yeah, you're already
I'll step back
spoken
here.
for.
I mean, I have connections with both the national and the state organization
Okay.
for PEG stations. And I have already started putting out queries about how those stations are handling some of these issues in their own communities. And I haven't gotten a lot of information yet, but I can keep pushing on that.
Cool. Yeah, they might have a good idea, or yeah, I don't know. I mean, like Greenfield has their channel.
Oh, yeah,
I
they have,
wonder
yeah.
if there's something there. So
And
yeah,
so does Westfield.
I just wonder if it could even take as simple regulatory wise, it would need to be a separate line item on somebody's bill like right now.
It could
it's
be
like,
that
you know, how,
simple.
like an electric, and so
Yeah.
you could actually see, okay, this is what's going, rather than just
Right.
give everybody one sum and then always be siphoning off 5% of that to
Right.
to another organization.
Yeah.
It just might have to be that.
On our cable bill we get every month, there's a breakdown on there.
Mm-hmm.
Is your fee on that bill? Cause it's got 2 or 3 that are really
I don't
weird.
know,
We
I've
looked
not-
at that one day, there's some things that are on it that, you know, besides what we pay for our
Sure,
cable.
no, I
there's things
understand,
on the
I
bottom.
understand.
Is that part of that, our bill?
I
usually
I
is,
think
if
it
I remember
usually
correctly.
is, but see, it may not be specifying Easthampton Media because the money goes to the city and
They
it's
call it
part of
something
the
else, it's like-
contractual agreement.
It's on a city page, you
It's
guys?
called like community
then the
something
city
or other.
They usually
moves
say
the money
public ac-
to
yeah,
Easthampton
public
Media
access.
in monthly installments.
That's a good question.
Cool.
It's kind of like the electric bill or
Mhm.
your wireless, like, there's like so many
Yeah.
additional
Yeah.
line items that you don't even know
Yeah.
what they're
Sure.
really for.
Yeah, so it could be as simple as that.
Mm-hmm.
I just, you know, the question I am constantly asking myself is, what are other people doing?
Yep.
Because those things are generally presumed to be legal.
So does
So-
Westfield have?
Westfield doesn't
West-
do anything.
Well, but
Does it
Westfield
have
does
a
have
public
cable,
access?
has public
They do
access.
have it, but they
So
don't
It's
have
paid
an
for
agreement.
through, is Comcast Westfield?
Over
Yeah,
there.
it'd be
Some,
Comcast.
I mean, a lot of, some places as big as Westfield might even have 2 service providers. A lot of communities.
Yeah, they have,
RCN.
they have
Right.
Comcast, but, they don't, I asked them about that when we did the tour, they said they don't have any arrangement right now with their
Westfield station.
public access.
Interesting.
Right. But I mean, you know, Amherst, Hadley, Northampton, they all have their own
Right.
stations like Easthampton Media.
I mean, it's entirely reasonable that for payment for services rendered, the municipality can help support. Whether or not that has to come out of the municipal light plant department, can. I don't know if that's even the most important question,
Sure.
you know, because there's more than one way to skin a cat, right?
Oh, yeah.
So, all right.
You do, going forward.
All right, so, any more thoughts on Easthampton Media? No? All right, I'm glad we're talking about that, because we really do have to, I think maybe there's a lot to study, but then you
Yeah.
stand for making the point.
Where are we at with the city council as far as the, you said they voted it out of LMO, where does it go next?
Um,
Payson.
It goes back to the full council,
Okay.
so either in 2 days or in 16 days,
Right.
depending on whether or not I need a public hearing. I'll
Okay.
bring it to the full council for a vote.
Okay.
I don't anticipate it being a difficult vote.
Yeah. If you want people to show up, like I said, I was
Yes.
sick for that last one.
Everyone is always welcome to show up, but I don't anticipate this vote being difficult. I think everyone in the council gets that we need to do this if we want the option of doing it next fiscal year, and they're never gonna be like, well, I hate options. So we're fine there.
Things that don't cost us any money.
So I'll do that, and then I'm also going to, I'm gonna reach out to Joe Pip tonight and just say, do you guys have any record of your, like, any record of what's on the polls?
Yeah.
And if you could take that from the other
Right.
angle and go after Eversource and maybe Verizon too, or maybe we can ask Stan to do Verizon, I don't know. Then that should, one way or another, I figure if we go the RFQ route, this will be, if we have that information already to say,
Exactly.
here's what our current situation is, what would it cost to set that up?
Right.
Then it should be pretty easy for
Yeah,
for people to
yeah.
figure out the
Proposals,
cost.
yeah.
Yeah.
That would be good. I'll try to set up these meetings in the next 2 or 3 weeks so that we have all this information by our next meeting, and I'll send out emails to everybody that is interested. And afternoon or Saturday.
I'll be in touch with you two about what's
Then the
stuff,
survey, and
getting
we can
survey
get
out.
that stuff going too.
I
I'd
just
like to
don't
get
think the
this
city
ball
has
rolling.
anything
Right.
special that we could use. I don't know if we wanna look.
Yeah,
I don't know.
I saw the
Could we-
mayor a few days ago.
Google form, we could look into doing just a simple Google form to
Yep.
do it, that way we could still
Would it-
collect that. I've done it where you get Google form information.
Right.
It gets submitted to a Google spreadsheet, like a Google sheet.
Would there be any value in
Collect all that data.
hosting it on the city website?
Oh, yeah, sure. Yeah, I mean, that will, well, having a link to it from the page or having a separate page.
I think
don't
just
know.
having a link on one of the city pages
Yeah.
where it's, in an area, survey for telecommunications or whatever, but you don't have to actually put the page on the website. Because
Okay.
again, they don't maintain that thing very well, I mean, better than they used to. I
did-
would prefer something that we had more control over.
Yeah. I did talk with Brendan Rogers, who might be getting his last name wrong, but he's the director
COA.
over at the COA,
Mhm.
and talking about either doing a small presentation over there and then
Cool.
when the survey's ready, and then having some kind of station set up there so we can collect feedback
Right.
from them, because I think that's gonna be a pretty critical
Absolutely.
I'll do some
demographic.
digging on Survey Monkey and other things
Yeah.
and decide on
I
a
know we
platform
have,
and how we
Alan
post
Wolf
it.
has one,
Yeah.
but it's his personal account I think they've been using.
I actually have
He's
some
also-
in my old days, we used to use it in
Oh, he's
Westfield
gone?
all the time.
Yes.
Oh,
Yeah.
since
A
when?
couple months ago, maybe a month ago.
Oh, okay. I'll have to look at when I exchanged emails with him. Oh, that's news.
Did you guys notice that 900-pound gorilla? It came out immediately when you started talking, or right after Greg talked, with the cost. What's it gonna cost? That's what somebody asked on the
Yeah,
council.
yeah.
That was
Yeah.
the first question they asked, what's it gonna cost?
Right.
And he said, he kind of blew them off and said, well, we're not really, dum-da-dum-da-dum or whatever. That's gonna be the first
Yeah, I mean,
thing.
it is, and that's why I was thinking we could potentially do a request for quote. That'll at least give us a sense of what people say they charge to do it. And,
That's gonna be the hard part, trying to sell that whole thing for what it's gonna cost.
But I
Yeah.
think one thing that Greg
That
didn't
part either.
cover in the presentation, and it was in the, I think it's in everybody's head, but it's a revenue generating model. It's
Yes.
not like you buy a school, you don't collect $5
Well,
from
yeah.
every student every day.
Yeah.
Like, you are getting money, and I don't know that would be entirely clear to somebody who's just listening without having the benefit of reading that
That's
letter.
why
that
I
This
think
is
we-
you're not getting this for free by being a
It's
city
got to be,
resident.
it's got to be a
You're gonna-
real good sell.
yep.
I don't think it's
I
gonna be
don't-
hard to
I don't
sell
think it's
people
gonna be
on
hard to sell at all.
voting for a
No.
bond for it when they know that,
We-
like,
Right.
revenue projections and projections of adoption rates
Right.
based on surrounding communities
And it
are
does-
pretty clear that we'll get this, we can count on this amount of money coming in. And
We
we can,
don't-
it'll pay itself.
Right,
I mean,
we can roll
yeah.
this out in sections, like I
Yeah.
say, the first part can be pretty small with a small investment, so it's not 12 million upfront.
And I think the key to that point is if we have a revenue bond and we totally fail and we can't cover it, they can't raise taxes to pay it off. It's not gonna happen. It's not possible. You can't take it out of the general fund to cover it. So,
Things like this in this article here, this is coming, it's not gonna go
Or
away.
you say
so-
you do sell it on the fact that we're gonna ask for this much money here to establish this pilot project, get some revenue coming in,
Exactly.
and then
Roll
let it
out
start to be
exactly like
self-generating.
Westfield did.
right.
That's the right way to do it.
Well, yeah, and that's the other point, is we might be able to say, oh, to do the entire city costs this much money,
Right.
but that's not really the ambition, it's to
No,
do
just
a
go a little
little
piece,
step at
yeah.
a
Most
time.
well-planned businesses start out slowly, and as the revenue shows up, then you start building out from there, once you have a revenue base, so.
Right.
Anyway, I don't
Shouldn't be
think-
that bad when you first start, right?
No.
Couple of mil maybe, something like that?
Yeah, probably.
Yeah, probably.
Just a couple.
Just a couple mil.
That's a couple mil here or there.
It's better than 10.
Yeah.
It probably would involve just
Between
putting money,
friends.
pick up the trunk line here and set up a small hut.
Yeah.
And
Yeah,
then
sure.
tip the neighborhood.
Yeah.
you know, so.
What do you think the projection is on fixing the old city hall? What do you think the projection on that is?
Oh,
It's like 2 million?
I think, no, that,
No,
that's
no,
about
no,
six.
no, they got-
That's probably.
I know
I
exactly.
thought it was like most of it was remediation,
Actually,
wasn't it?
It's the elevator is a big part of it.
I can tell you exactly
You
what
wanna
it
make
is.
a-
It's all
That's the money
remediation
that they
too,
need to
right?
raise,
Yeah.
is I think the last
6.
5 million, but they already have CPA money in place, and I believe state grant money in
Right,
place.
six-
too.
right, $6
It's a
million.
lot more than 6 million, for
Yeah.
the total cost of that project.
Yeah, yeah.
$6 million.
It's gonna be a
is that-
pretty, I mean, Eric's
So-
sewer and this town could be generating a lot more revenue if it had a place like that, cause nobody wants to.
That's true.
Nobody
but
wants to go to his.
just
But
saying.
that guy,
This is not-
DSP Productions, it's,
Hey, no,
You wanna shut
we are
this?
getting off pace, yeah, someone needs to make a motion to adjourn.
packed.
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
All right, I'll
One
vote
second.
for it, I'll second it.
All in favor?
Aye.
We are adjourned.
Very